Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
All right, we're back at it again.
Welcome back to the Advancement Podcast.
The Advancement Podcast. We are
with
again.
Todd and Tim.
Who? Never heard of him. We're back again at Mug on the Square.
Nice.
Woohoo!
I love that.
So if you hear any background noise, we are in a public space.
Yes.
So people
Recording
are
in
saying hi
December
to us.
for January.
Yeah.
So,
Although as we get started, I have to have a commentary on our drinks here. Okay.
Okay.
I'm drinking a black Americano.
Okay.
Tim's drinking. What are you drinking, Tim?
I'm drinking apple cider because I don't drink coffee.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh.
Can we ask for Tim's man card over here?
All right. Rachel has made it very clear. Rachel has made it very clear the world does not need me on that much caffeine.
Oh, okay.
Hey, but since you're ADD, caffeine has the adverse effect on you. It calms you.
I'd have to have a whole lot of caffeine. I
Whoa.
can't.
Laser focus.
Good angle.
I can't even drink iced tea after 3 o'clock because I can't sleep.
That's just because you have to pee all the time because you're an old man.
There you go. Now, that's another conversation. Good one.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, it's good to have you back with us as we continue this series on team.
Thanks, Tim.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't tell you.
Sorry.
I didn't tell you a story about when I first met Gary. So we're in this room, and Gary's facilitating this meeting, and there's 30 people there, and everybody's supposed to kind of give a 3-minute presentation at the beginning. And Gary's scanning the room, and I'm sitting to his far left, and Rachel and I are there, and we would raise our hands, and somehow I'm a W. I'm used to being at the end of the line.
Uh-huh.
I'm just not used to being overlooked all the time.
You used to be in last place.
What are you saying, Tim?
I don't know, dude. I was almost offended that I had to call out so that he would look at us.
Yeah.
So do we need to have a altar time so you can let that offense go?
Well, can't you tell I was so offended that we started? I was so offended that I thought Gary would be a great first guest for 2020.
Oh,
Can't you
okay.
tell?
Ouch, that hurt.
Break every chain, baby. Break every chain.
We're not overlooking Gary. We're not doing it.
Yeah. Let that offense go. 2020.
We'll deal with that.
2020 vision.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, God.
So let's continue our conversation on team, and we
So
really
who's our guest? Because in case they didn't listen to the last episode.
That's right.
In case they're a terrible person and didn't listen to the last episode.
So part 2, Gary Reinecke, we have our guest with us from outside of Anaheim, where I met him last year, and he is executive director of InFocus Ministries. He's an author. His passion is to empower leaders to start and reproduce healthy churches. His doctorate of ministry from really, we have masters, but he has a doctorate. We're uneducated.
Should we address you as Dr. Gary?
I'll leave that up to you, but no.
Okay.
Always want to give freedom on that.
Thank you, Dr. Gary.
Yeah. Nice.
And he's a master certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. He just loves coaching leaders and pastors, and he has a great love for church planters, which is tremendous. We actually met at a meeting talking about replanting churches, which is
You went to California?
Gary, do you remember the story I told there about the church we let die and replanted?
Yes.
Todd was the parent of that church.
Really?
Yes.
I was the Grim Reaper.
Wow.
Well,
Nice to meet you.
Tim
Yeah.
says you get to go and tell them they shut down. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, really. Thumbs
You're the
up.
man.
Well, when I said that to that group, because none of them had a story like that, they all went, "Y'all let it do what?" We said, "Yeah, we let the grass grow up," and they're all looking at me, and I just said, "I'm a country boy. We know that dead things make good fertilizer."
Somebody even called the superintendent and asked if they can mow the grass.
Yeah, they did. That's
Yeah.
right.
And
Really?
I told the superintendent, I was like, no, they can't mow the grass. But thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you for keeping me on point, Todd.
You're welcome.
I need another sip of apple cider.
From Mug on the Square.
There we go.
Anyway, so at the end of our last episode, we had been kind of walking through we'd taken a little bit of time to talk about transition.
Yes.
We actually have had one of our listeners send in some questions about transition because, that's as you said, Gary, last time, that's the hardest thing that a team goes through is transition on the team.
Yeah.
And it's a reality. I think we talked briefly, and let's dig into it a little more about the fact that there's transitions come in different phases. There's the transition by adding somebody to the team,
Right.
which you, as a church grows, you have to add to an existing team.
Precisely.
Then there's transitions of people that leave that we've released into ministry in a healthy way. Then there's those that leave and just leave us.
Right.
And there's also those that leave us because we send them away.
Yeah. Please leave.
And there's also transitions within a team, because in most churches you start out as a volunteer, and then you'll become a stipend person, then you become a part-timer, then you become a full-timer. You transition from being a youth pastor to an executive pastor. So transition is one of the uniquely challenging dynamics of any team.
Exactly.
So you told us last time that there's the pre-plan, there's the execution, and the post in any transition.
Right.
Now you talked about that in the context of, the context that you brought up was the person that left in a unhealthy way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, but I'm gonna guess, does pre-plan, execute, and post, that applies to every type of transition, whether it be the promotion, whether it be the new person. Let's dig through those 3 steps and help us and unpack that for us.
Okay. Well, kind of at the 30,000 foot view, I was saying there needs to be this preparation leading up to the transition. So if you're the lead pastor or the church planter, there's this season where you're putting things in place so that you can bring a new person on or help release a person or fire a staff. So you've got to kind of lay out what your strategy is. Some of that might be, 3 steps. Okay. Then you've got to actually go through the transition, whatever that transition is, and implement or execute. And then the post. And the post, depending on the transition, if it's bringing on a new staff, you've got to now really get them ingrained in the culture of the team and the congregation, and then be able to clarify expectations, set up agreements, which should already be in place, and then clarify what they're supposed to be doing on an ongoing basis. And I think to kind of couch all of this, in order to transition staff in and out, if you use a coach approach more than a supervisory approach, you're going to have more success through the transition process. Does that make sense?
Okay, unpack that for the people that don't understand the coach approach, and even more than that, I mean, as a certified coach, I'm sitting here thinking through the coach approach in all of these steps.
Because I would tend towards the supervisor.
Yeah.
Because how do I walk that line between the two?
Right.
Yeah.
You take the supervisory approach as much as you need to, but as much as possible, use a coach approach, meaning this. You're going to lay out what the expectations are for the job, bringing on a new staff person on. But then when you get down into the nuances of the job, you come alongside and help them flesh out some of the specifics of the job and how they're going to carry it out.
Okay.
You don't have to be that involved in the planning of that, but you can coach them around it so that you're not doing their job for them. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
So you're asking and listening more than you're telling, bottom line.
Right.
Gary, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about collateral damage.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I really wanted to unpack that a little bit more. And
Right.
I think from the supervisory to the coach, how do we help our church with that? How do we coach our church through the collateral damage that comes with losing staff members?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Boy,
And
that is good.
Oh, man, that was good.
mentioned that. Yeah, that was really good. I mentioned.
thank you. I'll
Hey,
drink more coffee.
he's a young guy, but he finds it he's, you know what they say about a hog and acorns, right?
Hey,
I love your sayings. By
it's the caffeine. It focuses the ADD.
the way. Here's what a church has done in order to work through that post phase, the collateral damage as a congregation. And that's kind of the question that you're asking right now.
Yeah.
There needs to be an outlet or multiple outlets where people need to grieve the loss and allow the transition to go through the full cycle. Okay, so part of the transition must be the grieving of a lost staff member, and people need time to do that. It's going to take the senior leader, the church planter, a different amount of time than it's going to take the average congregational member, but they need an environment, and that's what you can do as a leader. Create an environment where people can ask questions, they can celebrate the success, but also grieve the loss.
Yeah, because I see a lot of the congregation, obviously we can't give them all the details of what happened.
Right.
They almost feel like since they don't have the details, they don't have closure.
Right.
So how do we walk them through closure without giving them too much information?
Yeah.
Because there is a piece of, even when somebody leaves, you don't want to diminish them. You don't want to attack them. I mean, we still want if we're a healthy leader, we want God's best for them, even if they've left in an unhealthy way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, there's probably information that would be helpful to share with people that gets into the real reasons without getting into the entire backstory.
Right.
So I think you've got to, as a leader and as an inner circle, come to agreement on what you'll say and what you won't say.
Yeah.
And if people who should receive more information need that, it probably shouldn't happen in a public setting. It should be a one-on-one kind of thing in confidence.
Right.
So when you're meeting with your elder board or your team and you're saying this is what we're going to say publicly, also think through what we're going to say privately.
Perfectly. Yeah, perfect. That's it.
Okay. One of the things about the grieving process is that, if there are people who just know them, I know who they are,
Right.
The grief's not heavy.
Right.
There are people who are under them and being mentored or involved in ministry that was serving them. The
Right.
grief's going to be greater.
True.
How do you balance the cycles of grief within this spectrum of people within your church?
Yeah. I think that's a complicated answer, okay? Because it's going to be
That's why we have a doctor.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why we have
why
Dr.
we call the
Gary
doctor.
Reinecke on with us today. Because it's
Okay, I take it back. I don't have a doctor. It's
I like
complicated.
this. Do they call that a doctorate of yo-yo?
Yeah.
Yeah. I take it back.
Yeah. I put the degree in the shredder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to go back to the initial statement. It's complicated because it's going to be different, okay? So in the big group, you're going to tell, 10% of the story, okay? In a smaller, more intimate group, you're going to tell maybe 20% of the story. Or, you figure out what the ratio is, because sometimes too much information is too much information.
Right. Yeah.
And what you actually do is you cause more problems than you need to. And I got a case in point yesterday. real quick, they did a whole report on the fallout of a moral failure of a pastor. And they put the full report on the webpage, which was about 50 pages.
No way.
Wow.
Well, and they had to litigate the whole bit. So it's like way too much information. And I think there's a good example of creating problems that maybe you don't need to create for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of what I wrote down here is intentionally create various levels of information.
Yeah, I think that's a good principle to pull out of this.
Yeah, because I mean, I can do, and the percentage piece was what really gave it to me. I can do 10%, I can do 20%. We can even say that we'll give 30%, but no matter what, outside of this room, we're never going beyond 30%.
Yeah.
There, I like that.
So you can set your limit based on if people keep coming back, I can give you this much.
Right.
Yeah. Here's what I did last time, Gary. And you tell me if I did good, bad, indifferent, either way. When we let the church know that this staff member was going on, I lined up the elder board in front of the church, and I said, listen, these are the only people in the church that know all the information. So if you need to talk to someone more, these are the people you need to talk to. I said, anything else is hearsay.
Right.
These are the guys you need to talk to. Would that be good, or should I do something different?
I love that. Okay. Yeah, as long as they're in agreement of how much they divulge.
Yeah, we talked about that.
I think you're in a good place. And it is kind of like damage control. You got to kind of manage how much information goes out, because you're going to have to then deal with the repercussions.
Right. So that's that. Now, it would seem to me that on a positive leave, the steps are still the same.
Yeah, in a positive leave, it's like, if it's all good, there's not a whole lot that you're not going to tell. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, maybe that's the piece.
He's eating a cinnamon roll.
I'm eating a cinnamon roll. Sorry, you can't be in a public place where they've been waving cinnamon rolls around.
He didn't get me one. He just got one for himself.
You could have gotten one.
Say that.
You could have gotten one. Anyway, maybe it's still various things on the negative side. It's limits on what we'll say, and on the positive side, it's limits on what we hold back.
Yeah, I like that.
So, because you would love to tell the whole story publicly,
right,
on a positive, but you just usually can't.
No,
so we're going to tell this much, but if you want to come, there's more. And
right.
So you go to what's the minimum that we tell, not what's the maximum.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's great. So help us. Let's take a couple minutes and talk about the transition. As a leader, helping people transition from that volunteer through stipend, through part-time, through full-time.
Okay. I think there's a couple of things to be aware of. And one is expectations. There's a real transition from volunteer to stipend. Okay. Yeah. As soon as you bring money into the equation, things can begin to get a little bit gooey. Okay.
More money, more problems.
There you go.
Right.
So I think
that's a prophet in my generation.
Oh, prophet in your generation says more money,
more problems.
Okay. Yeah. More money, more problems. Okay. I'm going to write that down so I know. More money, more problems.
Money.
Not more.
No, it's mo. Okay. More money, more problems.
More money, more profits.
Problems.
So
problems.
Oh, problems. Got it. That was better.
I'm so glad, Gary, that I'm not the only one struggles with some of this stuff he says.
I'm trying.
Millennials were like, "That's a great point, Todd. I love it."
That was a great point, Todd. I'm so glad you said that. That was really good. Anyway, so it gets gooey, as Gary said, when you add money in the equation.
Gooey like your cinnamon roll.
Yeah. So being real clear about expectations when we begin compensating people. And the shift that I think most leaders need to be real clear with is that as a volunteer, it is a voluntary willingness to serve. As a paid person, it's more of a required expectation that you're now able to impose in a good way, in a positive way. So the commitment level is going to change by the employee.
Yeah.
One of the difficulties I think that happens is when you have people that are part-time or stipend or volunteer.
Yes.
One of the places that people, and you and I were talking about this last week, the difficulty becomes around accountability.
I would agree. Yeah.
You know, it feels more, well, you go ahead. It feels more awkward to hold a volunteer accountable or a part-timer accountable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how do you hold your expectations high to a volunteer staff member and, still be understanding that they have to have another job.
Right.
But then require excellence in your organization?
Yeah.
That's why I ask a doctor.
Great question. Yeah. Thanks. You're taking full advantage of that. So what I would say less is more. And this is what I mean. Let's hone in on the things that this person can do with a high level of excellence, given the amount of time they can give it as a volunteer capacity.
Right.
Less is more.
Let me put it in another phrase. What I think you're saying is we maintain the same level of accountability for everybody. It's just that based on their job description, what they're doing, we're holding them accountable for the volunteer, we're holding them accountable for this. That increases a stipend, and we're still holding them accountable. But at each level, we're just accountable for more or different, but we still use the same level of accountability.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but here's the reality. Todd, you're not going to fire a volunteer unless it's a really awkward situation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. With a staff person, you're going to fire that person if they're not performing.
Correct.
So that's a different level of accountability in that sense.
And I may ask the volunteer to step down.
I was going to say you might not fire, but you might ask them to do something different or put something to replace them.
Yeah.
True. But as soon as you get the compensation in the equation, it can muddy the waters a little bit.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say though. Regardless if you're working with a volunteer or a paid, taking a coach approach, and I'll explain what I mean by that, to help them really hone in on the things that they are passionate about will be key to their and your success.
Okay.
Do you want to unpack that, or are you good?
I think, since you gave us the coach approach piece on, it's basically the same thing you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's just a repeat, truth is when we talk all the time, we always tell guys to take that coach approach. The developmental model. One of the ones we do comes from Robert Clinton's old railroad track model. Remember that?
Yep.
That reflection point of, what'd you learn? What can you do better?
Yes.
Taking that coach approach piece for them.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So we're about out of time for this episode. We're going to do one more. So for those of you that have been listening, Gary's going to be back with us again next week, and we're going to continue our conversation about team. So Todd.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to love public places. We got a baby crying now. Love it.
I think it's actually my baby too.
Yeah. Oh, it is your baby. Yeah. His baby's next door.
Be quiet, Jonah.
We're going to send your baby to the other side of the room.
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't know about that.
He's too cute.
So you may have to get a visual on him here, Gary. Anyway,
between episodes.
So Todd, what's your takeaway from this conversation over the last 25 minutes?
I really like what Gary said about
Dr. Gary,
excuse me, or Dr. Reinecke. Reinecke.
Yeah,
Sorry. Like Meineke, but Reinecke.
That's right.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Getting with the leadership and deciding what you will share and what you won't share.
Yes.
I think that's very important because I've seen through different times that sometimes some of our leaders will share a little bit more information than we want them to.
Yes.
And it happens. People are trying to do good. But I like walking through the piece of saying, this is what we will say, and
Yes.
this is what we won't say.
Yes.
And I think being on the same page of that is very valuable, because it reduces the gossip and it reduces the hurt feelings.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of it really, that was good for me too, because I've walked through as a coach with lots of guys, and there's always that piece of, well, this person out here isn't grieving that loss as much as this person, and it's not fair that I don't give this person more. And that's true.
Yeah.
But how to gauge what's right and what's wrong. So that's a huge piece for us. So Gary, I'm going to rely on the coach again. For our listeners, what question would you ask them to ponder based on this episode?
Okay. So this goes back to clarifying job and expectations. So it's a who question. Who do you need to clarify expectations with on your team?
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. Thank you to Mug on the Square.
Mug on the Square.
So if you're in Cleburne, Texas, Gary, if you come to Texas, we'll bring you to Mug on the Square.
In beautiful, historic downtown Cleburne.
Oh, my Lord.
A vibe.
Oh, my gosh. All right, guys. Well, thank you. We'll see you next week on the Advancement Podcast. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.